Why was St. Joseph so obscure for so long in the devotional life of the Church? God only knows the answer to that question, but we can take some guesses. It seems that there was a lot of focus on Jesus, and rightly so. And only slowly devotion to Mary began to develop, and then eventually declared Theotokos, the Mother of God, the God-bearer. In the Council of Ephesus, strong devotion to Our Lady developed because of her close association with Jesus. Also, the understanding of her Immaculate Conception and her Assumption, the way that God would treat His chosen one. These kinds of things developed early in the Church. And then even with the first saints, it wasn't until St. Polycarp or some of the early martyrs that were celebrated as saints. There were vigils at their gravesite and a reverence for their relics. It wasn't until the 4th century with St. Martin of Tours that someone who was not martyred was venerated. So you can see there was a slow development about these things liturgically, and there was also never a shrine to St. Joseph because, well, one reason would be that his body was assumed into heaven, and so we didn't have relics of St. Joseph. There wasn't a place that he was buried and so venerated because he was taken up to be with God. And things also emerge as they are needed. Sometimes God provides those devotions later on in the life of the Church, and once people started to recognize who St. Joseph is, the first feast being celebrated probably in a Benedictine monastery. If not the first, then the second feast was celebrated in a Benedictine monastery. That makes me feel good as a Benedictine. Benedictines were among the first to really love St. Joseph. And then another devotion that developed was a devotion to the holy name of Jesus. And very closely tied to that was always a devotion to St. Joseph, because he was the first one to speak the holy name of Jesus, to speak it, to pray it in that sense. St. Bernardine of Siena, who had a great devotion to the holy name, also had a great devotion to St. Joseph. And then it was really breaking open with St. Teresa of Avila, and I think it went hand in hand with a prayer maybe that was a little bit more imaginative. St. Francis de Sales at the same time picked up on a devotion to St. Joseph. Ultimately, these things unfold in God's time. And what we can say is that there's been a cascade of devotion to St. Joseph ever since the 1500s. There was already a homily given at the Council of Florence speaking about the glories of St. Joseph. And then we also have that steady growth in devotion with liturgical offices and masses, the Solemnity of St. Joseph established on March 19th. And then coming into our time, all of the popes since Blessed Pius IX. In 1870, when he proclaimed St. Joseph the patron of the Universal Church, and he's the only patron of the Universal Church, which makes a lot of sense because he was married to Mary, and she is the type and figure of the Church. And so St. Joseph also, as he protected the Holy Family, he protects the whole Church. That's the logic of Pius IX, recognizing that he was already the patron. Pius IX didn't make him the patron. St. Joseph was already the patron. Pius IX was the one to recognize it. And then every pope since him, Leo XIII, Pius X, Benedict XV, Pius XI, Pius XII, John the 23rd, Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Francis, all of them have recognized St. Joseph in his greatness, have written about him substantially, given significant addresses, formulated prayers, and helped us grow in devotion to St. Joseph. So, while it was a bit delayed, and perhaps that was because the virginity of Mary and the knowledge of Jesus as God and man, maybe it was the development of devotional styles of prayer that would allow for more imaginative prayer. Maybe it was the need to emphasize the Holy Family and how much family life has fallen apart. And so especially now we need an emphasis on a holy family, that God didn't just save the world through Mary, but through Mary and Joseph. God came into the world as Redeemer through a family. Just as God created a family in the beginning, He redeems the world through a family. Maybe also in the need for a renewal of fatherhood in our time, we see this great and growing devotion to Saint Joseph. Also in the complementarity of the sexes, Mary and Joseph, male and female, able to love in their great difference from one another. A lot of reasons that Saint Joseph is certainly very important in our time. So, however, in the providence of God, it took some time for him to be recognized and for a devotion to grow to him and for the liturgical developments to happen to him. We're certainly the happy beneficiaries of a time that is seeing an incredible surge of devotion to Saint Joseph. You can be part of that too. You too can learn how to approach the family through the heart of Saint Joseph.